Hey, what's up, 6th grade students? How are you guys? I hope you had a great week. This week, we're going to learn about diffusion. That's where something goes from an area of high concentration to where there's a lot to an area of low concentration to where there's not. So, diffusion, area of high concentration to where there's not. So, to get ready for this chapter, I'm going to study by taking these books full of knowledge. Put one right here, get some tape, and I'll wrap this right around my head like this. And we'll keep going, and we'll put this one over here, and I'll go around this way. And if I keep going, what I can do is I will keep these books here all week, and what will happen is where there's a lot of knowledge in these books, it should soak in to where there's not a lot of knowledge in my head. So diffusion, from where there's a lot to where there's not. Okay, so maybe learning can't happen from diffusion where you take a lot of knowledge from a book and just soak it into your head. But diffusion is how gases transport from one place to another and how nutrients, those macromolecules we learned way back in lesson 1 of this chapter, can move into cells. That's how they get their food, their water, their air, and that's also how they can get rid of waste. We'll learn more about that as this lesson goes on. So let's take a look at what we're going to learn this week in class. We're going to start off this lesson like we have the last couple of lessons by going over a presentation with some information before I go over the assignments you have to do this week. Last week we learned about all the organelles inside of a cell. These are the organs that perform functions. Without these functions, cells don't really live. One of the organelles we mentioned was the mitochondria. The mighty mitochondria breaks food down into energy. Well, almost every cell, and whatever it does, or even to be alive, it requires energy. And it needs to get that energy inside of it because of the vacuole, it's an organelle we learned about last week, that stores food, water, and waste. Well, if a cell takes in food, water, and it digests it into energy, it's going to have waste. Well, that food, water, and waste has to have a way to get in and out of that cell. So that's what we're going to talk about today. The fact is every cell needs energy to live or perform its function. Whether it's a muscle cell, a brain cell, whatever type of cell it is, it has a function and it needs energy. Cells do not eat the way we do. They don't just open their mouth and bite into a hamburger and eat it. They're not like Pac-Man who just opens his mouth and moves along and just chomps whatever's in its way. Instead, it soaks all of the food and water through its cell membrane, and it even releases its waste through the cell membrane. Sometimes there's openings, sometimes they're not. So let's go ahead and talk about this. Most materials move in and out of a cell by a process called diffusion. Diffusion is what the joke was about at the beginning of this video. It's where particles of a substance move from an area where there is a lot to where there are not. So we talked about diffusion way back when we were learning about solids, liquids, and gases. And we talked about how gases move through diffusion. It's how when someone rips one on one side of the room, that gas and that smell travels all the way to the other side because it's going from where there's a lot to where there's not. Diffusion is also how materials move in through the cell membrane. If a cell is low on water and there's more water on the outside, that water will move from where there's a lot on the outside to where there is not on the inside of the cell. Diffusion is an example of something that is called passive transport. Passive transport is the movement of substances through a cell membrane without using any energy. So this is one of the processes that a cell can do without using energy, and that is soaking up things that are around it that there are more of. Diffusion, a lot to where there's not. Now, same thing with waste. If a cell has a lot of waste, well, now there's a lot of waste inside of the cell, and it's going to move out to where there's not. So this is passive transport. Osmosis is a word a lot of people have probably heard before, and osmosis is the diffusion of water through a cell membrane. Osmosis is a more commonly used word than diffusion, and I remember when I was in I think it was 7th grade, my teacher had this poster on her wall. And it said, "I'm learning by osmosis." And this is where I got the idea for the little joke skit thing I did at the beginning of the video. It's a picture of Garfield. He has a bunch of books wrapped on him, implying that there's a lot of knowledge in the books and there's not a lot of knowledge in Garfield. So the idea is he's learning by letting it soak in instead of working hard, reading, practicing, studying. But the problem is, this poster is really famous. It was in many, many classrooms. I even see it for sale now, but it's scientifically wrong because Garfield is not learning by osmosis. He's learning by diffusion. Because remember, osmosis is the diffusion of water, just water, through a cell membrane. So diffusion, going from where there's a lot to where there's not. And osmosis is when water can soak in and out of something. It's very similar to how your fingers kind of get all pruny when you're swimming for a long time. There's a lot of water in the pool, not as much in you. So it goes from where there's a lot to where there's not. Okay, so let's talk about, one more time, passive transport. Diffusion and osmosis are examples of passive transport. And the passive transport, one more time, is the movement of substances through a cell membrane without using any energy. If a cell has to use energy, it's called active transport. There are other types of passive transport. One of them is called facilitated diffusion. This is when molecules pass through a cell membrane using special proteins called transport proteins. Facilitated diffusion is used for large molecules such as sugar and glucose. So facilitated diffusion is when a protein has to kind of give the molecule a jump start or a little extra boost to soak in from where there's a lot to where there's not. Now, a couple seconds ago, I mentioned active transport. This requires energy. Active transport is when a substance moves through a cell membrane using the cell's energy, and it's called active transport. There are two parts of active transport. There is endocytosis and exocytosis. Endocytosis has the root word at the beginning of enter, and exocytosis has the root word at the end, beginning of it as well, for exit. Endocytosis is the process in which a cell takes in a substance by surrounding it with the cell membrane and then letting it soak in. So it takes energy to move around it. So earlier when I said cells aren't like Pac-Man, they don't just kind of walk by and just chomp on things. They don't. But what they can do is surround something and have it enter that way through a process called endocytosis. The opposite happens for exocytosis. Exocytosis is the process in which a cell's vesicle releases the contents outside of the cell. That's usually the waste. Here's the diagram of what it looks like. So if you look, the part of the cell membrane wraps around a particle, forming a vesicle inside of the cell. The vesicle is a pocket with some kind of a nutrient in it. Inside of the cell, then it breaks down inside of that vesicle, and a vesicle's membrane will join back up with the cell's membrane and release whatever waste is inside of it out. So endocytosis is where it grabs it and it pulls it in. It helps enter the cell. And exocytosis, which I can't seem to say right during this video, see, I told you I couldn't say it right. Exocytosis is where it pushes it back out. So it's not really that Pac-Man thing, but it envelops it, pulls it in, pulls the nutrients out of it, and then pushes it right back out. This push and pull takes energy, and that is why it's called active transport. So this is a quick overview of this week's lesson. Let's take a look at the assignments you are to do this week. This week we have 5 assignments to do. Should look very familiar because it's similar to what we've been doing the last couple weeks. We're going to start off with a set of notes, an ed puzzle, a Legends of Learning activity with questions, a review activity, and then a quiz. Let's take a look at the notes. These notes look just like all the other ones you've been getting since you've been home. It's got sentences with blanks. You need to use the book to fill in the blanks with the right words. Let's look at this. Number 1, a cell membrane is blank, which means that it only allows certain substances to enter or leave a cell. The answer to this is semi-permeable. When you're filling this out and you're typing the word semi-permeable in there, please do not just click in the line and type the answer. It keeps the line there. It makes it messy. It moves everything around. Instead, double click the line and then type the word. It creates a nice sentence. It's easy to read. It's easy for you to reference when you're doing the review activity, and you can reference these when you're doing the quiz. It makes it nicer for me to read when I grade it too. So after you're done with the notes, you will go to watch the Ed puzzle about cell transport. Remember, when you're at an Ed puzzle, it grades every question. So it keeps track of which ones you get right and which ones you get wrong. So if you don't know the answer, you can always re-watch. Here's an example. During diffusion, molecules move from blank concentration to areas of blank concentration. We know that's the areas of high concentration to areas of low concentration. Diffusion moves from where there's a lot to where there's not. But if you didn't know that, you can rewatch the video, and most of the time it'll not only say the right answer, it'll also show you the right answer. Check it out.
To low concentration. So when you hear someone saying that something's going with the concentration gradient, that's what they mean. They mean it's going from a high concentration of molecules to a low concentration of molecules. Now, remember how we...
So it showed the words on the screen and it told you the answer. So it should be an easy, perfect score for you guys. Once you're done with the Ed puzzle, you got to go do the Legends of Learning assignment. When you log on to Legends of Learning, don't forget to use the code Mr. J 2020, MRJ 2020. Log in with Google, and you'll get to play a game that's based off of one of my favorite arcade games. It's an arcade game called Puzzle Bobble, where you have to launch bubbles to match 3 of the same colors to make them disappear or drop, and you get a score. But of course, since it's Legends of Learning, there's also questions. This question says, how do we grow? A, our cells get bigger over time, increasing our size. B, our cells multiply and create more of themselves. C, the vitamins and minerals in the food we eat cause our bones to get longer. Or D, our brain sends signals to our bones to grow during sleep. Well, this goes back all the way to lesson 1 about the cell theory that cells come from pre-existing cells. Remember, our cells don't get bigger, we just get more of them. So the answer is B, our cells multiply and create more of themselves. So I'm going to answer the question. I get to play the game. I was playing the game before I recorded this, so I have a power up. So the way the game works is you get to click on the screen, or I think this works on a tablet, and you get to aim this bubble and you want to match similar colors. Well, this is a rainbow one. Whatever I hit, it'll match those. So I'm going to aim for these purple ones right here, and it should remove those purple ones. And I have 4 out of the 6 requirements. Now I have a red bubble. I'm going to aim it for the red. This would be the easy shot, but I'm going to see if I can bank it off the wall. That's a fun thing to do in this game, and get it right in between these 3 and see if I can take that whole row out. Let's see if I aimed right. Nice. So now I have 5 of the 6 requirements. I have an orange one. I have a feeling that if I hit this orange one right here, I'll have all 6 of my requirements. All right, so I cleared the level. I get to move on. I'm going to learn a couple more things, and then I'm going to go to another game. There are a total of 6 levels or 6 games that you're going to have to play. And throughout it, you'll get questions to get power-ups. It's like an arcade game. I like it. I hope you guys do. Don't forget, after the game's over, it's going to ask you to rate it. Be honest. After you rate it, it'll have some questions that will go over and finish this assignment for you. All right, when you're done with the Legends of Learning, I have a review assignment. It's a Google form. It's just like the study guides we did before the last test. So when you log on to it, there's questions that you have to answer, and sometimes there's little puzzles that go with it, and there's a graphic organizer on the next page that you have to fill out. Please take your time, use your book, use your notes, put the right answers in there. This is a great review for the quiz, which is what you're going to do next. When the review is done, you're going to go to the quiz. The quiz looks like every other Google quiz I've given, and if you've done everything before it, if you've taken your time to get the right answer in the notes, you paid attention and learned everything from the Ed puzzle video, and played Legends of Learning, did the review worksheet, you should do great on this quiz. Please take your time, fill everything out. I wish you luck. Have a great week. I'll see you guys next week. Bye. So I'm going to say the wrong answer.